All right, today is the day, and you guys are blowing up YouTube for me right now. It has been interesting last couple of days, 3 or 4 days, when a lot of you have come to the channel and discovered things going on here in the studio. And I thank you for subscribing, watching the videos, but we're getting a pretty good following. And with that has come a lot of new questions, and some of the things that have really been coming and be repeated a lot are questions about my experience, my education, and what it takes to build a project like this. But when people ask what it takes to build a project like this, I think what they're really asking is, what would it take me, meaning you, the viewer, what would it take you to build a project like this? And I can't answer that completely, but I can certainly tell you my experience and what I think you should work on to be able to develop the skills, the time, the money, those kind of things to work on a project like this. But before we answer those questions, you're gonna have to sit through some car making videos. Of course, that's what you're here for anyway. So we're gonna jump in and look at doing some lamination. I've pulled the mold out for the front bonnet, and we're gonna work on that. Pretty excited because I've been anxious to get that part of the body done, kind of tie some things up and be able to work on some fabrication on the front end instead of always at the rear. But we're gonna look at that today. So let's jump over there. We'll look at prepping the mold for doing that laminations. Then I'll answer some questions and we'll get into building that bonnet. Now this mold has been sitting in the side of the shop here for many months, and I couldn't remember the status of the wax job on it. So gonna put one more layer of wax on it, buff that off, get ready for a parting agent after that. You could, of course, run this whole job and just use the wax as a parting agent, but I always use the PVA releasing agent. We'll be putting that on later on, right before we do our laminations. But with the wax on, now we can go ahead and put our flashing. This might be becoming a little bit familiar for those who have gone through the videos now before and seen it on the rest of the car. But these little flashings just go onto the flange that we created and make kind of a turn back so that when we produce our part, the part will have a rounded edge, or an edge with a turn back on it as well, I should say. And this is just created by a little 2-inch strip of galvanized sheet metal, and they're hooked on there with the mechanical paper clips. You need lots and lots of clamps, and these little clips seem to be just about the right size, and they're very inexpensive, so they work fantastic. Put some around the wheel wells. That flange is probably a little bit wider than the rest of them on the car, making a flange of good 3/4 inch, so actually making it at 1 inch so that I can trim it back to 3/4. And then having to break this into segments, of course, to come around this curve around the front. And then the last thing we'll have to do is flash around the headlights. And that makes real nice for the flashing, curves right around, fits in that, curves that headlight just beautifully. And once we have our flashings in, it's time to do a fillet. And that is done with this little round radius tool. Yeah, of course, you roll the clay up like a snake and press it in with the tool. Go back and drag out the extra material. I said that gives us exactly the radius of that little tool, just about 1/4 inch. Well, as you can see, we've got the mold ready to go to do some laminations, a little releasing agent, and then it will be time to start doing that. But before we jump into that, as promised at the beginning of this video, I'm going to tell you a little story, a little backstory of my experience and how I got into this car business anyway. I've told this story before in a previous video, but the audio quality there is really crappy, and so I think it's apropos that we kind of revisit that. Like I said, lots of people have been asking about my experience, my education, and how I ended up doing this kind of thing. This all kind of goes back to when I was a young teenager. Back then, I lived in rural Nevada, about 18 miles from the local town, and so when I wanted to do things with friends on the weekends, it was much more convenient for my mother to just let me stay in town. Had a good friend that I could stay with, rather than her having to make that 18-mile drive both ways to take me to any kind of activities. So while I was staying with this friend, he happened to have on his wall a couple of posters. This is one of them here. Found this at a collector studio out of Canada. Anyway, that poster was very influential in my life because This being the late 70s, early 80s, of course, the cars were, well, we can't say anything better than they were mostly pretty just ugly cars. And of course, what was being produced in the rest of the world, at least in Italy, and specifically by Ferrari here, of course, was just pretty spectacular and eye-catching. And so I became enthralled, enthused, and smitten by these vehicles. And led me into, of course, thinking that one day I would like to have one of these cars. But I came from a very modest family. We didn't have lots of money. And my dad happened to have actually made a life-size elephant out of fiberglass. And he said, well, why don't you just build your car the same way? Just build it out of fiberglass. And so that became the starting point. And so as a 14-year-old boy, I started building a model of a car and pursuing this whole idea of being able to take it from that small model and build it into a full-size car out of fiberglass. So through the process of building this car, my dream then became following this whole idea of kind of becoming a car manufacturer, kind of following the DeLorean or Tucker, or for you younger people, the Christian von Koenigseggs of the world, those who come in from the outside and try to do their thing in the automotive world. So I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a lot of experience in or people or mentors or people I could go and visit and see how they did things. So I thought the answer might be I would go to college and learn some things. So I went to a small college in southern Utah and got into an automotive program there that ended up just being kind of more of a glorified high school shop class. And so I did pretty good in that program, but it just was, like I said, more of the mechanic side and automotive. But that was good because it did get me a little more, we'll say, experience and a little more confidence to go out. And I got a job soon after that working at a Ferrari, Porsche, Fiat, Lancia dealer, and got the experience of being around those cars and getting some mechanical skills behind me as well. But then I took off a couple of years and served a mission for my church. And when I got back, I thought I would go right back to that car dealership and maybe go into sales and, like I said, just expose myself to those exotic cars. Well, that didn't work out, but I did end up finding a beautiful young woman and getting married. And as part of that, getting married, my wife got introduced to this whole idea of me trying to become this car manufacturer. And I made a deal with her early in that marriage that if she would work for the first year while I went out and tried to raise money to build a prototype of this car that I wanted to be the manufacturer of, that then she wouldn't have to work for the rest of her life. Well, she upheld her part of the deal. I went out and started searching, trying to raise money, creating renderings and models and things like that to show people, to kind of get an idea of what this model or this car was going to be, my dream of building cars. And I worked and struggled that for a long time, had no idea what I was doing. I came from, like I said, kind of a modest family, working class people that just was never exposed to money, raising money, venture capital, those kinds of things. So I was just kind of fumbling in the dark. The only thing that happened with that is I did run into a couple of owners of family fitness centers that had made a lot of money, as they would say, selling fitness to people that never came to get fit. But they did have a lot of money. They both had Lamborghini contacts that they would go out in the desert and race together. And they both decided they were going to contribute $75,000 each, but that was still only about half the money I needed to build a prototype, I figured. And this was probably a great blessing in my life because I was really not ready to do this kind of a project. My skill levels and my experience probably would have just been getting maybe a roughshod prototype together, but never would have put me in the position to go into manufacturing. Anyway, like I said, maybe it was a blessing. Maybe I would have learned some things along the way, but that's all a moot point, I guess. But anyway, kind of the year was waning on, and I decided time for me to get back to work, fulfill my side of the deal. And that's kind of how life goes for a lot of people. It's a matter of going off and making a living. Of course, we're also having a couple of children, started coming along, and I just fell into the world of working, making a living. But I had also always had this special skill sets of being able to create things. And so while I was working all different sundry jobs, I also started to take on kind of a side hustle, as we call it now, and kind of became a model maker, prototype developer, trying to do new product stuff, trying to find people that had ideas that they wanted to call inventions or patent and take on to become new products. And I did a few of those things, but those jobs were so far and hard between that it was a very vicious cycle of looking and looking to try to find jobs. And once I found them, you'd spend all your time working on it, and then the job would be over, you'd earn some money, but then it was off to search and find somebody again. Now, many of you older people remember those days being a lot more difficult than it is today with the internet, to be able to link up and hook with people. You're pretty much limited to the local city you were in, running an ad in the yellow pages and hoping somebody found you. Especially for some kind of a profession like this, a model maker, prototype builder, there just wasn't a lot of traffic in that world. And so, like I said, that was just kind of a side hustle for many years. But one of the things that happened in that time is I also taught myself AutoCAD and started doing little jobs for people doing drafting and creating maps and things like that. With the AutoCAD skills, I'd also developed kind of an interest in architecture and drawing house plans and things like that. Ended up working for an engineer. In that time working for that engineer, we decided that besides just doing the engineering, that maybe it would be profitable that he also did the architectural side, did some design of the houses. And I took on that role and started designing the houses. The rest of the office would do the engineering, and he could, so to say, kind of increase his profit margin by doing both sides of the business. Then some architects decided that they did not like the idea of having somebody in competition in the engineer's office when they were sending their work there as well. So we decided a mutual agreement that I would move out of his office and start my own business. And that went really well for quite a few years, and especially into the housing boom. It was doing really well until 2008, 2009, when the housing market crashed here in the United States, and building pretty much ceased for a couple of years. So with the downfall of that business, as it was declining and that market was drying up for a while, we decided it was time to find a new business. And so we started another business, and that has been doing very well. Doing well enough that it provides the money for the studio here that we're working in and other things that go in my life, supporting us there. I still do architectural work, but I am trying to phase out of that because it's gotten to the point where those things are kind of just a nuisance. They interrupt my life when I'm here trying to build cars. So hopefully bringing back this whole idea of building prototypes will maybe consume more of my life and reduce some of the other things that I can push out of my life that have been supporting this kind of thing. Now, with these other business ventures in these recent years that have done well for me, I've found that this ever-increasing feeling has come to me that I need to kind of give back a little. Felt very thankful for the things that have come into my life, and I wanted to give back and kind of do those things. And YouTube, I saw, was one of those things that was a way to kind of pay it forward, to be able to help other people and share what's going on, the things in your life that you might be able to be of some influence to other people. And so I thought, how can I do this? And one of the first things I did is I wrote a book, and then that just wasn't going to work. I started with some videos trying to do the talking head thing. I'm kind of doing that now, but when I started that, it just wasn't working at all. Something about when you turn that camera on, it just shuts your brain down, and it gives you a lot of respect for actors and people who do this kind of thing professionally. But anyway, it was still this nagging feeling that I needed to do something to kind of pay back and be grateful for the things that I had been given in my life. So in the midst of the struggle of trying to figure out what I could do to kind of pay it forward, I kind of had this inspiration. I kind of feel like it was almost like God had sent me this answer to what I was trying to do. And that was I just needed to kind of calm down and just go out and do what I do best. And of course, the thing I do best is to build things. And with that, I thought, well, with my love of cars, let me just get back to doing what I do best. And I'll just apply that to a project that I can share with the world and let them see the skills, maybe, like I said, inspire others, other upcoming engineers and creators to do something big and to go out there and try to make the world a little different themselves. So here we are on YouTube. We're halfway through this project. We got many more ideas to come. We'll be bringing that into this channel as well. So as I say, just doing what I do best and putting it on YouTube, I guess I should describe what it is that I do best. Yes, that works. Do best. Anyway, those things, what are my skills and where did I come about to the ability to do this kind of things? Somewhat, it's the experience you have in your life. Some people might say it's genetic because I come from a family of artists. My father was an artist. In fact, we had a foundry in our backyard for many years as he was a sculptor and cast our own bronzes. So not only did I learn that go get it done attitude from him, but also the artistic ability, just seeing that kind of thing in your life all the time, just kind of has you exposed to it, knowing that you can do it because you're always involved in it as just part of your life. So like I said, I have a huge amount of artistic ability inherited or learned from my father. And with that comes a lot of problem solving when you get into especially things like foundry and the technical side of casting sculpture. That changes it from the more perceptive art to the mechanical art, as I would have to say. And then of course, I've always been extremely interested in the engineering side and how to solve problems. Another thing that's really been a big impact on the way I do things and the way I've been able to accomplish things is I would say that I have, I won't say a photographic memory, but I have kind of a photographic concept memory. Meaning, I can't look at a book and go back and tell you what was on the page in just a few minutes later, but I can walk into a shop, watch somebody doing some machining, and then turn around and duplicate what they did. I have this ability to visualize things very well. Maybe not Nikola Tesla style and be able to run motors in my head, but I can visualize most things. And I've kind of mentioned that a little bit in this project that I never have really gone into, and a lot of people have asked me about this, why I didn't go with the 3D modeling and using that model. That's because I have the model. It's there in my head. The only thing I really have to do is go into AutoCAD or somewhere and create some drawings so I can do some dimensions, not only for myself to keep track of some spatial reality, but if I need some pieces made somewhere else, I need to have dimensions for them rather than trying to tell them what's in my head. But that's been a skill or a ability I've had that, like I said, not a photographic memory, just the ability to see something done and walk away and recreate that technique, that skill myself. Some might call it a tool dexterity. I guess that's just a part of what it is, being able to walk away and use tools at a very skilled level to duplicate something. Like I said, I feel like I'm kind of born with some of that ability. And of course, once you keep doing it a while, it's something you develop quite rapidly and get better at and better at. That answers a little bit of the question about how I acquired some of the skills and the abilities to do this kind of things. But I guess the question comes back to what does it take in general, or at least for other people as well, to be able to accomplish this kind of stuff. And let me just jump in and say one of the first things I think is probably of most importance if you're thinking about taking on projects or you want to have this kind of a lifestyle and do this kind of thing, and that is materials. Once you know what kind of materials are out there in the world, it opens your mind to the ability to take those materials and manipulate them into different things. And the more you know about materials, the more ways there are to create a product, a piece, fabricate anything. So I would say if somebody wanted to go out and study and read books, the best thing to do is go out and read, discover about materials, whether it's metallurgy, composites, glues, fasteners, all those kind of things. The more you know about materials, the more you'll be able to accomplish just by being able to manipulate those materials. Another one is tools. People are always asking me, where did you get all the tools? How many tools? What kind of tools do I need to do this kind of a thing? And the answer is start out with whatever you can afford. Go out there and get a tool, become proficient at it. Once you've mastered the tool, then you have the ability to create a product, sell that product, or be able to sell your labor using that tool to make some money to buy the next tool. It's been a lifelong journey for me collecting tools. I'm 56 years old right now, and so I certainly don't have all the tools I'd like. No man ever does, but I'm getting some to make things a little easier in my life. In fact, today it is so easy to collect tools. Younger people watching these videos don't realize what the change has come about in the world in the last 20, 30 years is just astounding in what is available to us to just drop a few bucks on Amazon and have it in 2 days. Many of you have probably never used a handsaw and probably might never need to, because we have oscillating battery-powered hand saws, routers, skill saws, jigsaws, saber saws, scroll saws. It's endless what's available today as compared to even 40 years ago when hand tools were still king. Another big question for people is time. How much time does it take to create a project like this? And you don't know. I guess I can only say probably about 3 times more than you think it is. At least twice what it is if you actually calculate out very carefully what you think it's going to be. You can go down, mathematically figure out your time, kind of each piece what it'll take, and it will be double that. But don't ever double that, because your estimate will then be 4 times. So just kind of figure out how long you think it's going to take and just be ready to spend some more time at it. But the trick is never to worry about the time. You're just there to get it accomplished. So the saying goes, kind of the rabbit and the turtle, who's going to win the race? That person that's slow and consistent. So you have to lose today's vision of everything now. The instantaneous gratification that's in the world now has to be cast aside in kind of a project like this. You're just there to keep plugging along, and before you know it, it'll be done. In fact, some people have kind of scoffed at one of the titles I've created for my video, thinking maybe it's kind of a clickbait thing saying, build a supercar in your spare time. But in fact, I have actually, the videos that you've been watching, created those videos in the last couple of years in my spare time while running a couple other businesses beyond the car itself and the YouTube. I've also built a 3,000 square foot addition, this studio, onto the shop, put in a swimming pool, remodeled another house, and some other sundry jobs on the side as well. And the trick is you need to, like I said, slow and steady, just keep plugging along at those things in your life. If you come home from another job and watch TV, you have just wasted a lot of time. In fact, if you just start waking up 2 hours early or going to bed 2 hours later at night, that's 14 hours every week. And if you total that up, every month, you have a 40 some hours of extra time, which is a full work week every month to be able to accomplish something on the side. Now, the last factor in the equation of what does it take to accomplish a project like this is, of course, money. And I have a lot of people ask me, how much does it cost to accomplish a project like this? And in particular, this project, of course, I have set a budget of $25,000. And that doesn't include some of the new tools I've bought that are going to be a little more specific to this project, but that is just the materials. And of course, we'll never get into the cost of what it costs in labor, because that would just scare everybody away, I'm sure. But anyway, the materials for this thing, I'm staying pretty good within that budget, except for lately I've just started coming across a couple of things, I don't know, been kind of placed into my lap as this would be a really good thing to add to the car. So I haven't gone too far out of that 25,000, but we will probably peak a little over 30 in the end. But still, that's reasonable if you're talking about looking at the purchase of a new car today anyway. But what about some of you out there, maybe even you're very young and you haven't gotten into the work world to earn and save some money? What does it cost to create a project? Well, first off, you certainly don't want to take on a project of this complexity and this magnitude. There are lots of other ways to do it, a lot less expensive as well. And in closing on that, I guess I'll also say, as part of what does it take to build something like this, is if you're new into this, don't try to build something like this. This is an extremely complex project, and there are other ways to build your skill set, learn some new things by starting a little more simple. I've mentioned before getting an existing chassis and building a real simple body on top of that. Another way, talked about another viewer about kit cars. I'm not saying I think kit cars are the best in the world, but it's certainly a good way to get a shell and to really adapt it and modify it to what you really want. And finally, there is the option of building and designing your car, but in a more simplified version, maybe building it on an existing chassis. The only thing I would say is between the kit car world and building your own design in more simplest form is don't replicate an existing car. If you want to own and drive a Lamborghini Aventador, don't go out and think you're going to build one, because you never will own a Lamborghini Aventador. And in fact, if you go out and get yourself 2 or 3 jobs in 4 years, you could go out and buy one, and that would probably be faster than trying to build one. So instead of having a look-alike that never is the real thing, just save your money and buy it. Definitely design your own car, build something unique, and go out there and change the world. We're going to jump onto doing the laminations, finishing up this mold. Well, we're not going to finish it in this round, but we're going to get a few layers of laminations on for this video. Now that we're back to laminations, we of course first need to put our final releasing agent on there. That's this PVA. And I've come down to where, especially under doing all these back cuts where I can't get a spray gun, best to use a brush. So now that release agent's on, time to start laminating and put some resin down. And like we've done before, like I said, this is kind of getting a routine for you people that have been watching the videos, but we go to a real lightweight fabric cloth that reduces the amount of, or the definition of the fibers, so that we don't get a print through into the resin. You won't see that on the outside of the bodywork, at least less so because of this thinner cloth. And so the lamination starts off with using this real lightweight cloth, and that lightweight cloth also conforms very, very easily to extremely compound curves, and so it helps us to build up our first layer, which makes the next layers to drag or slide on the resin a little bit better. So we'll start off with this lightweight cloth, and of course I've got these 2 little bumps sticking up, which actually are the air vents in the hood. Of course, now in their negative form, they're big bumps, but they will be recesses in the hood for air exiting out of the hood. And then, of course, this fiberglass has got to also come down and meet the flanges. So around this headlight, we've got a pretty compound curve around there. So I had to do a little bit of a clipping to make sure that it made the transition, that 90-degree bend against the flashing. And we'll just keep going around and putting the thin cloth. But here we are, we've adjusted now to the heavier cloth, and then we're just going to go through and do this over and over. Like I said, this is not all of the laminations. This is just the first few layers you're going to see in this video. We'll come back to more laminations as we build up the layers and do reinforcements on this hood. As for now, going to put one last little reinforcement around these hood scoops, and we'll be done with this, at least for now. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Come back to see us again.